Hey Dad, why is this plant not looking so good?
That plant does look unhealthy. But did you know that sometimes it's not the plant that's the problem, but it's the soil? The soil could be unhealthy. And sometimes we have to add certain amendments to give it more fertility.
Better soil?
To make better soil. So today, we're going to talk about 5 amendments that we can add to our tropical soils so that our plants can thrive. All right, the 5 amendments that we're going to go over today are dolomite, bone meal, kelp meal, a good compost, and a method of creating your own fertilizers from your own home called Korean natural farming.
Let me share with you a little story about my path to increasing fertility on my off-grid homestead here. I live in what you would call the Ohia forest of the Puna Plains on the east side of the island of Hawai'i. It is a fairly fresh lava flow with young ohia trees growing here. And we have about maybe 1 to 3 inches of soil. And most of the lots around here tend to get cleared. My lot was no different. I cleared part of my lot. I cleared an area where we only had invasive melastoma and the ohia trees were located just kind of in clumps. And we saved those clumps and cleared the rest. So what I was left with were a bunch of rocks, literally rocks. There's no soil. And so to increase the fertility here, I brought in soil that I found in Hilo on the side of the road. That was from a dredging project. I brought in tons of mulch from the dump, which was way easier back then. Now it's a lot harder to get mulch. I brought in tons of manure from the zoo. I have chickens and whatnot that I was also harvesting the manure and spreading out in the garden. And I was also creating my own humanure and using that compost in the garden. So I had all these materials go into the garden and things were growing well. But then somebody told me about pH and how it works and how I could unlock all these nutrients that already exist in the fertile tropical soils of Hawaii. There is so much fertility here in the tropics, but the only problem is our soils tend to be a little acidic. So by adding just a simple amendment, a lime or a dolomitic lime, which is what I use, which also has an addition of calcium and magnesium, I was able to really kickstart the growth on my property. It didn't happen overnight. I used a granular form of dolomitic lime that took a little longer to act, but I noticed after a year of application, things were really starting to change. And I didn't really add any extra mulch or compost during that time. So it had to have been the addition of this dolomite. And that, to me, really opened my eyes to the fact that sometimes compost, mulch, manure, that's just not gonna cut it. We have to bring in other amendments to really unlock things out of the soil. pH works in a weird way. The neutral part of pH is known as 7 on the pH scale, and that's where you want to be for plants to be able to uptake whatever's in the soil that they want to uptake. Once you get off that scale, more and more doors begin to close, but we can bring that soil closer back to 7 by adding in lime here in Hawaii. So dolomitic lime is one of the #1 amendments that you should be adding into your soil. So now when you look at the soils of Hawaii, you may notice one thing. They're pretty thin. And the roots of the plants that grow out here need a lot of help to be able to make their way through this rocky, thin soiled land. And one way that we can help those roots develop is by adding bone meal as an amendment to the soil. Bone meal adds phosphorus to the soil and enhances the root growth and the fruit set as well. And when adding bone meal, we can really give plants an extra boost in enhancing root formation. It's a really important amendment to add to our soil. I'd like to add about 1 pound for every 2 inch of trunk diameter. and I do it about once every year here in my garden. And by using bone meal along with the dolomite, I've really seen the production of my fruit increase and the taste and flavor as well. Another great amendment to be adding into your soil is kelp meal. Kelp meal is filled with trace minerals and nutrients that are lost in the soil. They're a great source of potash and just magnesium and calcium and trace metals that are good for the plants that you normally don't find in soils. And whenever you add kelp meal, it just tends to add a little bit extra to the vitality and nutrition of your plants. Now you can do this by collecting kelp, limu at the shore, or you could buy kelp meal once again at Farmer Supply Co-op in Hilo. All great places to get kelp meal. If you get it from a natural place, be sure that you kind of wash off the salts if there's a heavily salted area. Otherwise, a little bit will be okay. But yeah, besides kelp meal and bone meal and our lime, those are kind of the main store-bought additives that we would be adding to our soil. The rest of them, we're gonna make ourselves. Now you can't underestimate a good compost. A good compost is the foundation of healthy soil. At my place, we use a wide range of compost materials to make our soil. We got horse manure mixed in with human manure, mixed in with leaves from our nitrogen fixing trees. We have some grasses and we have some compost from the kitchen. All of that gets thrown into the compost pile. Normally the leaves are brown and dry, and that is our dry carbon, and green stuff is the nitrogen that gets thrown into the compost pile. And after a year, we have solid, healthy, good compost full of worms, and the plants really dig it. They eat it, they take off. You could really see the difference when compost is applied. And adding compost regularly is actually really key out here because of all the rain. We just had probably 3 weeks of rain, maybe about 15 to 20 inches of rain during that period. The rain just tends to wash things out. So when out here in the tropics, the more you can add, the better. So make as much compost as you can to include as additives into your soil. So the last amendment that you should be adding into your soil right now is not just one amendment, but it is a whole style of increasing fertility for your soils. And that is the techniques used in Korean natural farming, creating indigenous microorganisms and breeding them to be spread in your soil, to spread this micro-orgasmic universe that plants love. Fermented plant juices and other fermented concoctions that really help bring out the health and vitality of your plants. Korean natural farming has been proven to be a really effective way to create cost-effective fertilizers and amendments for your garden by pretty much propagating them on your own. I'm still a newbie in Korean natural farming, and I am building my skills right now and would love to see how it reacts to my land here over the years now that I'm beginning to apply it on my site. So there you have it, guys. 5 amendments to be adding into your food forest here in Hawaii. These amendments will kickstart your garden and really make it thrive. And if you want to learn more about creating a food forest of your very own, I made a video highlighting exactly how to do that here in Hawaii. Until next time, guys, ahui ho.